In the immortal words of everyone's favorite pop diva,
Whitney.
the taste of your lips, I'm on a rise.
Brittany. I got a knee. Whitney, Brittany.
There's a knee involved somewhere. And then your side.
I had a knee.
Finish that line.
You're toxic. Do, 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 do. What?
Nothing. Roll the opening, please. Just roll the opening.
Hello.
Welcome back to
What's Safe Word?
I'm Amp.
I'm Mr. Christopher.
And today we're getting
Toxic.
it's the way you go like 5 octaves
Like the
higher.
inflection. It's just- I thought I'd make it fun. It's a fun
Toxic.
topic.
Toxic.
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 Ick.
Toxic.
Now the word toxic, or at least the derivative of it, comes from the Greek saying toxicon pharmakon, or I'm not saying it right, just let it happen. It means poison arrows, poison for arrows, okay?
Oh, Pharmacon sounds like some sort of pharmacy convention. Are you going to Pharmacon?
Are you experiencing shadiness, maybe even a vile or weird vibe from your friends? Well, take Pharmacon.
I feel like it's something that's become especially popular nowadays in our lexicon, deferring or referring to people that are just being bad. Whenever we say the word toxic masculinity, can we just have like some sort of Kill Bill siren and like, I don't know.
Like Pee-wee Herman's
sock-
Playhouse?
Yeah.
Today's secret word is
Whoa, I'm toxic, bitch.
And I think when we look at our history, especially BDSM, especially my generation, there has been a lot of talk about being toxic.
In such a way that as we grow and as we progress through things in communities like, for instance, kink, there are certain histories that are a bit toxic, that are a bit aged, and that we can hopefully learn from, but move forward and away from certain thinkings or maybe even an old guard perspective.
The hypermasculinity that came from an old guard generation was actually done for a reason back then. Now they seem to be excluding people from our community, and that can be perceived as toxic.
And I think any community can have a bit of toxicness to it if we don't check it and actually talk about it. And more recently, coming from Chicago, we saw firsthand some very toxic mentalities as well as stereotypes that still exist within our community in a very racist puppet show, which kind of got us thinking and wanting to talk about what toxicness exists in our community that we should be talking about, calling out, and being not just against, but overtly trying to stop. Welcome to the toxic episode. Had some like bubbly ooh. And while we've done red flag episodes before, which are specific aspects that can be toxic, this episode I think is going to be centered more around what causes the toxicity that can exist in communities. I think a lot of people will draw on like toxic masculinity, especially when talking about kink and BDSM. So I went to the internet, one of my favorite places, which is very toxic, and asked you guys what is something toxic you've either seen in the community, experienced, or just think needs some changing. Not even a day later and almost 250 replies.
Wow.
There's a lot of So even after reading all this, I've got my Final Fantasy anecdotes ready, and hopefully we can apply some of that to our community as we talk about some of the things you guys perceive as toxic or have experienced in all of your replies. Are you ready, Daddy? Do you
I am so ready.
gas mask on, maybe?
I'm a little scared, but yes, I'm ready.
As you should.
Yeah. But do you know what is not toxic?
The thing that helps us sleep at night. Today's sponsor.
Helix Sleep.
So we'll talk about them more, about all the savings you can get with them. But first, let's get into the first toxic trait that might exist in this community. And the first one from Nikki Street kind of mirrors a bunch of answers in this thread. It's one of the largest things, and it's just a mixture of, as they say, racism, body shaming, lack of accepting of the word no, if that isn't your kink or you don't particularly feel comfortable doing something with that partner. Yes, racism as kind of started this conversation for us is a huge thing, but I think it should go without saying, even though we need to say it, the kink and BDSM community does not stand for transphobia, racism, kinkphobia, fatphobia, misogyny, or any sort of phobia or scarcity or scaredness of a community that exists. Our community, first and foremost, is about providing a space for people to be themselves without judgment and without stigma, so long as you're being respectful and not harming anyone.
I do have to say we should give credit where credit is due, because I remember a time back in the 90s where personal ads often had no fats, no femmes. They would call out racial groups. Not into that, not into you, not into you. You don't see that so much anymore. Actually, I would say it's curtailed by about 85%.
Where are your stats coming from?
Just me on
Oh,
mine.
okay, well.
Just me. I don't see it anymore.
That's
Do you
fair.
see it anymore?
I see it every once in a while. And while we don't have tons of research to show how it's changed over the years, we do know that online, where dating is still very rampant, does still have inequities. And we know this according to a study done by Cornell, where they saw black men and women are 10 times more likely to message white people than white people are to do the inverse. And we even saw some dating apps in the past couple of years take away racial or ethnicity filters in hopes of decreasing racism. But this actually could lead to more harm on those communities than good. And sadly, that's because there's a racism problem in America, not just in the kink community. This was one of the most prominent kinds of answers, followed especially by this next one from Ochosi, Hallie, Psycho Dad, Clint, which all pretty much amount to gatekeeping. People saying they're only into this one specific thing, or people saying you can only do kink this one specific way. Gatekeeping is this huge problem within the community because everyone feels entitled. Everyone's so...
Well, everyone thinks their way is the right way.
Exactly.
So they want to put what they know as the Bible.
I don't know everything, and I never will, but I'm absolutely here to hear your experience and hopefully see where you're coming from. And I don't have to agree with it every time, so long as I'm understanding that your background and your journey is different than mine.
I agree.
Okay. And a part of that does come from our society's way in which the media portrays kink and BDSM to be abusive, 50 Shades of Grey, and apparently continues to do so even with the most recent American Horror Story, which y'all keep tagging me on and want me to do a review
I
of.
haven't seen it yet.
I haven't either. Maybe we'll do an episode, but
Okay.
apparently it's bad BDSM and it's in the AIDS crisis.
Not
and
bad BDSM. Not again.
Next trait, Benji says, I don't know if this counts, but a guy blocked me after he found out I was a substitute teacher.
That's oddly specific.
Well, he wasn't looking for a sub, he was looking for a dom. Are puns toxic?
Yes.
No.
Yes.
No.
Yes.
No,
Everybody.
no. As we go through this, I think it's fair for our own toxic traits we notice to come up. And for me, I think one that comes up a lot, fetishization of someone or something about a person and belittling that person to the kink and fetish that you're into without treating them with the consent and respect that requires like, hey, I'm into this thing. I'm all about your feet and just your feet. Can I do that? You know?
So I can't be just into your ass?
Well, no, you can, but you tell me that all the time and how much you love it. And that's what makes it okay.
What if I just talk to it?
You
Hey,
were
ass.
just- Wow. Hey, you dick.
Oh, you're into my dick. I like that.
Miss Bunny actually follows up with, which is kind of relatable. I want to talk about kink with people without everyone assuming I'm DTF, which means... Oh no.
Doing tough fisting.
Down to... And,
Down to.
and personally, as someone who's demi, I actually kind of like this. I think a lot of the time, especially when we start to see people in person, people assume that I just want to everything because I love talking about sex. When in fact, I just really like talking about sex, and I find it fascinating to hear how people work and what makes them tick.
But you are DTF. You're Demi to.
Get out. Get out.
Fights. And the next one from Tiger Yoshi. General to any community, the inability to understand and effectively articulate one's true desires and intentions. Identifying as a dom master is not the same to everyone, and being able to articulate what you truly mean for oneself may not be clear.
And to that is just everyone's reality. We're all currently trying to figure out where we fit in our journey. Sometimes we latch on to a thing that makes sense, and then once we learn a little bit more about it, maybe we diverge a little bit and we're not a dom top, but we're like a verse top. Everyone should be allowed that space to learn, grow, and figure themselves out while learning that terminology. None of us know it all.
Or maybe you're a pleasure dom.
Ooh, a pleasure now. Ooh.
I've played with so many different doms, so many different subs,
So many, huh? How many?
allegedly.
Allegedly.
Each one of them has a different way they play, and each one is a little different in what they enjoy and what they like. And because, you know what? We're all individuals at the end of the day.
So what you're saying is everyone's different and Helix knows that?
Yes, and we all sleep different.
And that's where the Helix Sleep Quiz definitely helps you get some rest and doesn't use any toxic materials.
There is no toxic materials in a Helix mattress.
Now, Helix Sleep has been one of our longest running sponsors here on the channel, and Helix makes it easy for you to find the mattress for you using their Helix Sleep Quiz. For you, yourself, or you and a partner. Now again, you can do for one sleeper or two, enter in their names, their heights, their weights, as well as sleeping positions. So me and Daddy might have different kinds of sleep positions, maybe even firmness preferences. And if you happen to be like us, who are a little older, we do have body aches and pains that we can also specify. Lord knows my knees will never be the same since COVID. But we ended up with a what, Daddy? A dusk?
Lux!
And Daddy, how are you enjoying it?
I love my Dusk Lux. Say that 3 times fast.
Dusk
Lux. Dusk Lux.
Oh,
Dusk Lux.
yep. And since getting our mattresses, I've actually never had sleep that was this good. I had an old mattress that had some springs in it, and because Helix has springs and this lovely like cushioning sensation, they're not only the best mattress for sex, but they're just the best mattress to get a good night's sleep.
And before I got this mattress, I had my other mattress for over 10 years.
Plus, Helix not only ships to you very, what, Daddy?
Quickly.
Some scissors or...
Oh my god! I got it.
And when you're ready to really let it inflate,
Do not try this at home.
what do, Daddy?
Ooh, it's the opposite of a vacuum rack. It goes, ready? It's eating me!
If you've ever bought a mattress, there is that nagging sensation of like, ooh, is this the right mattress for me? I don't know if I like this. So we especially like that they have what, Daddy?
100-night sleep trial.
So over 3 months for free that you get to try it out. And if you don't like it, you can ship it back and you get a free refund.
And don't forget, Helix has a 10-year warranty.
And they even offer financing options and flexible payment plans. So if you go to Helix Sleep today and use offer code WATT, you get up to $200 off your mattress and some free pillows on us.
And the next one from Spaceman is people who want you to call them sir when they're not your sir. I don't call my friend's mother's mom, so I will not be calling you sir. So that happens a lot. People call me sir all the time. They also call me daddy. I'm not all that offended by it, but I get it because I'm not in a sir dynamic.
But it comes to the terms of like how you speak to someone, an honorific or even a degrading term with respect and consent is totally fine. But if you were to approach someone and started calling them piggy or calling them your puppy or using terms like daddy, which is age related, and piggy, which is like weight related, that can be triggering for someone.
And I think that's actually more problematic when they assume you're a boy or a sub.
Yeah.
Because it's even more demeaning, especially if they don't know your pronouns. Right?
I think a toxic trait we see a lot is the assumption, and a lot of these come from assumptions of somebody's preference or even position in bed based on their age, weight, height, whatever. Those assumptions are toxic, and while not intentional sometimes, still are something we should call out and be more mindful of, which is what this episode is about. Not about calling people out for being toxic as much as making sure we're more mindful about how we approach people in the kink scene. Be more respectful.
I have to acknowledge that some of that comes from our leather history, where that was a commonplace, where if you were younger, you were assumed to be a sub. That does not hold true anymore, and the times have changed. But we also need to recognize why that occurs at times.
Yeah, back in the day, back in my day, we were trying to flip the script and we were being called feminine and we were being called like sissy and other terms I'm not gonna use to refer to us because we were seen as inferior and lesser and not men enough because we liked it. Yeah, they were slurs. And while there is space for that, there's also space for growth there. And the people who have come up to me sometimes and said that they've learned so much from us as someone who's like maybe half their age, I think that's telling that, you know, and nice to hear, but
I've learned so much just having you as a partner because you do have this fresh, younger, newer perspective. I probably would have some of these toxic traits had I not been checked and told that they were wrong, because just from the background that I have.
And what I appreciate about you is that you a little bit, but then you hear me and you do your best to change how you think or what you do, because sometimes things are really hard to be unlearned. But if we don't give people the space to do that, then they become
even more toxic, because then we get embedded in it. Like, why are you telling me what to do? Why are you telling me I'm wrong? I've been doing this all my life. Why are you like this?
Indignant. Tread carefully with the toxic traits, please.
But actually listening helps.
I'm glad you know that. Okay, next toxic trait. Kind of similar. The next one comes from Plant, who says, I think the rigidity of roles. I feel, at least in my experience, that most people are afraid of seemingly being submissive as a dom, and that leads to toxic behavior. So to summarize, I think that this is a bit of a toxic masculinity thing, but also how we assume what people are into. Doms that are all about being doms don't want to be seen as submissive, and vice versa. Maybe a sub doesn't want to be seen as a dom, although it goes both ways.
It had a negative connotation to it. It had a sub as inferior. And that was the role play that we did for a very long time. That was the dom sub experience. Now, with the free flowing switching back and forth that is very commonplace now, but many doms would never, they would get very offended if you thought they were a sub.
And I think that even to that, like, some people think that we have too many phrases and terms and roles now, because I've heard even like switch and verse. Why are we even using that? Stop it. Like, no, because it gives us the power to explain a dynamic of, I like to be somewhere in between. Words are powerful and words have place, and it's important that we kind of verbalize and we give ourselves those labels. On the similar wavelength, Chuck comes in and says, I am a respectful dom. Thank you. I have met maybe 3 other respectful doms. And I haven't experienced so many doms trying to either out-dom each other or tell my pup they will own him and want to own him, or that they do own him. Some egos and consent need checking.
Yeah, that's an old school thing too. It used to be when you went to the Eagle or some leather bar, the sub had to be respectful of all doms, whether it was their dom or not.
Why don't we
It's
just be
a very
respectful to
old
each other?
school thing. But yeah, I have seen doms try to out-dom each other, and that is very toxic and gets to be very problematic very quickly.
Again, lack of respect and assuming things, which is actually kind of funny because the next one that comes from Shalaris says, subs not respecting that doms have boundaries as well. And I think that comes from just the toxic masculinity of it all, where we don't think that doms can have boundaries because they're always in control, or even that subs can't have boundaries because they're not in control ever. Like, everyone should have boundaries and limits, and we should still treat doms with respect and kindness and make sure that they're feeling well, because they also need aftercare too.
Lots of it, actually.
Okay, well, not that.
Let's just do aftercare. Let's skip the sex. Just do right to the aftercare.
Movies, video games, snacks, cuddles.
One thing that I've noticed is that some people get into the kink community and lose their identity because that's all they become.
Which is kind of sad, but I think a lot of the times, and this might be a bit of a frenzy thing, or even like new relationship energy to the kink community itself, that can get in the way of the actual site, which is finding yourself. But in the process, you actually find different versions of you that people want. And to that trait, we also have to talk about the work-life balance of it all. Like the kink life and the social or family or work, whatever life, there is a fine balance to that. And some people, I mean, I'm one to talk as an educator whose life is kink and social stuff is kink. But I'm just saying that generally, like, you can't lose yourself in that if it's not like part of your everyday life. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's the balance. Everything has to have a balance, right? And so doing the kink life 24/7, and I know people who can do it, I've seen it, but having that balance for quality of life as well, to have a healthy life, it's hard.
Yeah.
And next one from Ginger Dad Bod says, folks assuming a lack of clothing is consent. And we just saw this at MIR where they had posters everywhere saying gear is not consent. So with your ass hanging out, how many people grabbed your ass?
Well, you know, my solution to this problem is just putting on more clothes, because then I need even more consent, technically, according to this this toxic trait. So if I need super consent, because I've got 2 jackets on, a shirt, and I'm gonna go, where'd my hat go? Gear is an indicator that you might be into a thing, flagging for instance. But even though we see flagging, we still have that convo of like, oh, you're into that. And you go from there.
And even if they're flagging, doesn't mean they're into you. So you have to have that conversation before you start pissing on them if they're flagging yellow.
Yeah. I mean, the number of times I've been groped or fondled without consent, even at a bar, like it's not sexy for someone to go out of their way to start probing and getting into your personal bubble. I'm not saying you can't be like nudged and like standing next to me and we start bumping, but before you start literally assaulting,
fingering.
Yeah. You gotta have a conversation about it. Come on.
May I finger you?
Why, yes, kind sir. Let's just step over here. Ooh, Pup Lupin comes in hot by saying using BDSM as therapy for mental health without first discussing that with your partner or seeking any professional help. Ha! So, BDSM, kink, and the extracurriculars in that area are a lovely, wonderful, not replacement for therapy, but something that can help us work through things and have therapeutic feelings. Again, not a replacement for therapy.
And using BDSM in that way makes your self-worth reliant on that action.
Or that partner, and that's not good BDSM. So maybe find an actual therapist. Therapy's good.
Real therapy is good.
Yeah, real therapy.
And Booyah says, I have no limits.
Ah! At this point, I think it's a joke. People that say that.
Everyone has limits.
Yeah.
But I see it in profiles on Recon all the time. No limits. Everyone's has limits. And if you think I'm wrong, I will prove it to you.
Who are you, Lindsay Lohan?
The limit does not exist.
This next one from Fruffy, which is definitely topical currently, who says an aging leadership / control network that will fight needed change at every angle. We're not asking you to leave, but we need you to understand things are not the same as the 90s. Literally, this entire conversation
That's
we're
what
having.
this conversation is.
And I think that there is room for history and there is room for change and learning and still honoring that history that's not offensive and makes room for new identities and people that want to be part of this community, but feel like they can't because there's no room for femmes, there's no room for people who are trans or non-binary or this label or that. And that's such an archaic way of thinking, only because we didn't have that terminology back in the day.
And the mere fact that we still call it the leather community, even though very little people wear actual leather, there's so many other fetishes like latex, neoprene, and sports gear that are all fetishists and all good BDSM players. You don't even need leather to tie someone up. So things change.
I like kink community or even BDSM community, but kink just kind of is an overarching, encompassing term that we can all use easily.
Yeah, we need a shift from leather community.
Agreed. And regardless of a Helix mattress or not and how you sleep, to the question that was brought up by Tiger Yoshi, I think it's important we allow ourselves space to not only make mistakes, because they happen, but space to grow and learn and figure ourselves out and where we fit in. It's not easy, and it's certainly not a one size fits all, because I started with a small dildo and I got bigger just like the rest of you. But doing that also allows you just the forgiveness of figuring yourself out. And I wish we were all a little bit more forgiving of each other.
I forgive you.
I didn't do anything.
I still forgive you.
Ah! And last but not least, from Andrew, who says, no safe words. I'm just reading in that toxic masculine. Because no matter the scene, no matter the kink, it's always important to have a safe word. And today's safe word, daddy, is
Toxic.
okay.
I mean, toxic. Okay, I have a real question.
Okay.
Is the word toxic used too much?
I think that in our new age terms that we tend to use, things like vibe, toxic, bestie, some of them have kind of gotten a little bit too jokey. But I also think it's the best word that we have to kind of encompass a way of being or a state in which you're being negative. Yeah. I welcome other terminology, but when I say the word toxic, your brain kind of goes to that place where you're like, oh.
Yeah, but if you're using that word for something minor, why don't we use negative?
Okay. Negative. Well, that's
Negatory.
because no one uses the word negatory. Hey,
That's toxic.
Okay, I'm sorry. Well, then I welcome new terminology in any way, shape, or
See,
form.
you're not listening to me. That's toxic. See, you can overuse toxic. I told you.
If you two would like to give us some new terminology, maybe a replacement for toxic, you can do that in the comments down below. Or even leave other traits that you think exist in this conversation.
And you better like this or you're toxic.
Oh my God. Isn't that, that's toxic. Oh my God. Oh, and you know what? You know what stops toxicity? Subscribing.
Or if you like ringing bells, ring that bell down below.
And we will see y'all next time. Bye. Baby, can't you see?
Negatory.
Oh, can't see?
No.
Are you, hello? Hello? Am I over here?
Sensory deprivation.
Toxic.
I think we've said it enough.
Toxic.
No, that's toxic.